Hey, my power's out. I can't watch the latest Nintendo Direct. While I've been outside here, I've been doing the only natural thing anyone would do in this situation. Reflect on how people get informed about video games. I mean, what if there's people in my situation right now who can't or maybe just don't want to tune into every single Nintendo Direct? Well, let's see. The Switch 2 Direct has 6.6 million views. That divided by 8 billion, and that's 0.000825, so around 0.083% of the world's population. So yeah, most of the world, and even just Nintendo Switch owners, do not watch all these Directs. And Nintendo Directs have only been a thing since 2011, so how did Nintendo fans, and heck, just video game fans in general, absorb all this gaming info in the past? Well, we should probably begin looking in the most dire of times, before the internet. Obviously, info just wasn't as widespread as it is now. Of course, there were ways for it to be spread, but I just want to clear that up. None of these things will ever be as popular nor convenient as the internet. You got that? Good, because that's going to be on the test. First things first, I think the most obvious thing that comes to mind when talking about stuff like this are gaming magazines. Of course, you might get rare scenarios where regular newspapers and things related would publish news about video games, but they'd never be as in-depth compared to gaming-focused magazines. Back in the day, there were many different brands of these magazines, with the first one being a British magazine series called Computer and Video Games, abbreviated as CVG. Seriously? That title's more of a garage sale advertisement than a video game magazine. Well, we're just gonna have to live with this. This thing started being published in 1981, with the first issue covering stuff on things like Othello and Space Invaders. Well, yeah, it's November of 1981, what else did they have to do that day? Also, they gave some tips on how to learn programming, which is just kind of interesting to me. I don't know, I just feel like stuff like that was so niche at the time. Like, my grandpa would never be seen even looking at an if statement. Well, magazines like these kept on coming. Things like Electronic Games in 1981 and Atari Age in 1982 began, but lots of these magazines came to a halt in 1983. Due to the North American video game crash, video games began to pick up widespread hate, and a lot of these magazines were forced to be discontinued because of it. Some did barely hold on though, like the aforementioned CVG, but that's mainly because it was British and not American, where the video game crash actually occurred. However, because the NES saved the industry and my life, these magazines could strive once again. There's two big ones to talk about here. First and foremost, Electronic Gaming Monthly, or just EGM for short. EGM started being published in May of 1989, focusing on Mega Man 2, which had just come out a few months prior. Over the next few years, and especially the 90s, EGM got very popular and became notorious for their 4-person reviews. These allowed readers to get multiple perspectives on games, and led to the magazine's success. However, 1 year earlier in 1988, another one of the most popular gaming magazines began, Nintendo Power. Yep, and around August of that year, Nintendo published their first issue, mainly focusing on Super Mario Bros. 2 and Zelda 2, with the super iconic cover of this weirdly colored Mario made of clay. Luckily for me, I actually own 2 issues on Nintendo Power, one from 1990 about Super Mario Bros. 3, and the other from 1995 about Yoshi's Island. And since I actually have these, I think it's a good time to discuss what these magazines would actually look like on the inside. Well, I think it's fitting to start off with the first thing you see, the covers, and these 2 issues are nothing short of spectacular. From what I can tell, these are original pieces of art made for Nintendo Power. Mario 3 is kind of doing that weird thing that original issue of Nintendo Power did with the Mario 2 made of clay thing. I don't know if this is clay, but, you know, same species. And the Yoshi's Island art, I know there's art like this, like there's a few pieces of art with like all the Yoshis or whatever, but I'm pretty sure that this is original for Nintendo Power. And I think this is so interesting because I know in future issues of Nintendo Power, they didn't do this. Instead, they just used actual key art from the games. Like, I know 3D Land's issue got that short end of the stick and was just key art. So anyways, opening these up, they talk about the cover game. Wow, who would have guessed? But these actually go into surprising amounts of detail, man. Mario 3 has detailed maps on, like, every level in the first world. Like, you got World 1 here, World 1-1, World 1-2, all this stuff. And, they end up having maps of just the rest of the, like, world maps, not just every level. But it doesn't spoil the last world either. It's just like, Bowser's home is very dark, dingy, and grim. It's full of fire pits and molten lava, and there's not a map. It's just, I respect that. And that's just something I'm kind of noticing, like, also with the Yoshi's Island one, they just have these little blurbs on each level. Platform perils. No Mario game would be complete without a romp through a treacherous series of high platforms. Time Yoshi's jumps carefully and watch your step. The decrepit stone path leading through the level desperately needs repair. Like, okay. I don't know, I just kind of feel like this is a little too much info. Like, I feel like it kind of ruins the first time experience of playing these games. But I guess, like, I don't know, if you want all this info, you might have already played the game. I mean, I don't know, play the games however you want. I'm just saying. Like, I guess I can't be talking because I've never been in this game. Anyways, I'm noting all of these Yoshi, like, pieces of art, and I actually looked on Wikipedia. These are not original to this Nintendo Power issue. I mean, that's fair, I'm just saying. Although I do think Mario 3's section here has these little power-ups here, those are originally drawn. Seems we got some, like, comics here. Howard and Nestor. I think these guys are, like, John Nintendo Power or something. I saw this guy earlier on some... Yeah, he's in this little Nintendo Power logo, and on the back here also, he's in this little section here. Cool. And obviously, they're gonna have a bunch of info on games that came out at the time, like Super C on NES, Mega Man 7 on SNES, and, you know, they do the same thing as they would for the Mario and Yoshi games, except obviously they can't go into that much depth because who wants to read about Ultra League Superstars? And it's kind of cool. They did, like, these little contests and stuff. You could submit art or stories, and you'd win. Like, this one guy from Ohio, his NES survived this flood because it was in a box. Congrats, Kevin. I wonder what that guy's doing today. Maybe he is in NES. Oh, man. And they talk about the Nintendo World Championships here, and they had these little quizzes with questions submitted by Howard Phillips. Real Nintendo fans recognize that name. He was the one who stopped the Lost Levels from being published in North America. Thank God. But, you know, I just wanted to take a look at this stuff. Thought they were pretty cool. You know, these are some of my favorite games of all time, so... Nah. Well, yeah, pretty cool, right? Well, everyone sure did think that, and gaming magazines began to be extremely popular throughout the 90s and early 2000s. The hype slowed down a bit nowadays due to the internet being much easier to use and all that, but it certainly is interesting. And that's the thing. I feel like I want these to come back whenever I look at them, but realistically, Like, yeah, I bought these and they're pretty cool, but I looked through each of them like twice and that's about it. There's no doubt that I would do the same thing to new issues if they still released today. So, yeah, it may be a bit sad to see these magazines go, but, come on, man. Something very similar to these are video game walkthroughs. Not the type of video you'll find on GameXplain. No, I'm talking strategy guides on paper. These are pretty much the same shtick as magazines, except they usually are just more focused on one game and help players learn tips, tricks, and sometimes even glitches. While I'm on the topic of magazines and guides though, I wanted to mention something a bit similar, being holiday gift guides. These are little booklets giving you a catalog of a bunch of different gift ideas in case you can't think of them yourself. I remember when I was little, my mom would always give these to me and I'd circle what I wanted. This usually equated to me just skipping to the video game section, but nonetheless, they are definitely ways of spreading the knowledge of gaming internet free. Not only do they give kids some info, they also give parents some info, and everyone knows that when parents learn something, trying to stop the spread of info is like trying to get my dog to fly. It's not gonna happen. That also highlights probably the most common way of info getting around back in the day. Simply just word of mouth. I mean, this is just a natural thing that people do. Yeah, they're gonna talk about Mario Party 5, Arby's, you name it. One of the most iconic forms of this was on the school playgrounds. You know, when everyone always told you a bunch of shit. Yeah, here kids would obviously spread around gaming news, and even just play games, like on a handheld or something. But also, the rumors spread were impeccable. I've heard. Stuff like Luigi being in Mario 64, Mew under the truck, you know, all that. But I'm not really focused on specific myths at the moment. The point is, this was another way people got informed of important gaming news. Another major way people used to get info about games, and honestly still do, are with commercials. Some of the greatest commercials of all time are from the early 90s era of gaming, like the iconic Genesis does when Nintendo don't. And yeah, these commercials can sometimes be very cool, but I feel like that's about it. realistically, these commercials have never held so much info. Like, if I was some guy living in New York who had never heard of a Nintendo 64, and a commercial for it comes on and says, "We live in a 3D world and you should buy a console for $400. I'm not gonna really care, and I'm probably just gonna continue on with my day. I mean, yeah, commercials helped it all, but they obviously weren't super great motives to buy something. Maybe just for a game and not a console, but I digress. The interesting thing about commercials, though, is that they are most certainly still existent today. Once again, they have died down a little due to the triumphant introduction of streaming services, so, there's less actual TV commercials, but I guess things like YouTube balance that out with ads. Anyways, it doesn't matter. They're there. However, there is something I want to mention. Commercials alone may not be enough to sell a console or a game, but you definitely do not want a bad commercial, because when a commercial fails, that thing being advertised becomes, oh wow, it's like fate. The commercial failure! There's been several of these things throughout gaming history, and while they don't all necessarily regard just commercials, they'll certainly play a huge role here, hence the name. Some examples of these are like the PS3, specifically in its early days. I mean, really? This thing was $600 at launch. That's almost $1,000 in today's economy. Plus, the launch lineup was nowhere close to the Xbox 360's. Of course, with some rebranding, the PS3 was able to turn itself around. I'm talking about the Wii U now. Yep. The Wii U's advertising campaign sucked. It sucked! People kept saying about the Switch 2, oh, it's gonna be another Wii U situation. No one understands just how terrible this thing's advertising was. People didn't know it was a console. They didn't know it was a console. A 2? Yeah, people know that's different. A U? What does that mean? And the ads themselves were trash. All of them regarded some cringy kids trying to prove to their parents why they should buy a Wii U, and literally just listed off the minor things that the Wii U had that were unique. It was terrible! Sorry for getting a little worked up there. Don't get me wrong, I like the Wii U. That means I like Nintendo Land. But it just goes to show that you need good commercialization to sell a console well. One more thing I wanted to quickly mention before we get to the internet section of the discussion are demo discs. These were usually promotional items given away for free and had, well, demos of other games. I mean, blowing 70 or I guess $80 on one thing is nothing to look past except for rent. Oh my god, that's a steal! But yeah, being able to try out games for free is a great deal, and eventually it evolved into downloadable demos. These things are also very useful and super convenient. I mean, what if I don't like Kirby Star Allies? I don't want to waste money on something I'm not gonna like. Fine. Well, that's about it for the pre-internet era. This is about to get a little vulgar, so to those of you who hate the internet and think kids just have it so good these days, I don't really care to socialize with you. I mean, you can keep listening to me talk, but I don't really care. Well, yeah, with the internet comes websites where people discuss anything from to basketball, and video games were never left out of it. Some of the earliest popular sites saw video games at the center of them. Of course, you had your online magazine type websites like GameSpot, which made it easier to learn some gaming info. Also, throughout the early 2000s, you had stuff like Reddit and 4chan, with things like Twitter and YouTube arriving later in the decade. Of course, video games were definitely talked about in all of these communities, but they were definitely not the center focus. Nowadays, video games are the most popular form of media, but that was definitely not true, even in the mid-2000s. Hence, most YouTube videos were not talking about video games, but instead, look at this funny image of my cat. However, there's a third category of websites I want to take a look at here, of course being the video game reviewing websites. These days we usually think of websites like IGN and Metacritic, and honestly it was no different then. IGN was founded in 1996, so pretty early on, and Metacritic followed only 5 years later. These websites allowed players to get many different perspectives on games, and persuaded some to buy or to not buy a specific game. Well, now I know I should probably stay away from that. IGN especially appealed to a large range of gamers due to its wide array of content, including news, reviews, trailers, previews, and guides. IGN also had a Game of the Year system at the end of every year, which perked the interest of many. There was just a lot IGN had to offer, and some of its reviews weren't simply about just the game, but an event based around them. That event was known as the Electronic Entertainment Expo, or more widely known as E3. E3 was an annual trade event that was always held in Los Angeles. E3s occurred for decades, with the first one happening in 1995. The main deal with these things is that big companies would come in to show games, consoles, or whatever else they had in the works. And not just any big companies. No, things like Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, and Sega were there most of the time. At least when they had consoles to show. And they showed, man. In just the first year, Sony announced the PS1 and Sega showcased the Sega Saturn. 1996, Nintendo revealed the N64 alongside Mario 64 just a month before release. 2001, Nintendo showed off the GameCube, where's Mario, Microsoft joined in revealing their new console, the Xbox, and Sony dominated the show with everyone's lord and savior, the PS2, with games like Final Fantasy X and Metal Gear Solid 2. To sum it all up, E3 was a magical experience or something, who even cares? Yeah, during the 2010s, the big companies began to trickle away from E3, with Nintendo and EA leaving in 2013, Sony leaving in 2018, and Microsoft leaving in 2019. All of them had their own reasons to leave, like Microsoft was moving to an external venue to show off their stuff, but the one that caught most people's eyes was Nintendo. You see, 2013 was still during the first year of the Wii U's lifespan, and during the first year of the Wii U not selling well. Nintendo dropped out of E3 to begin doing digital presentations, which we all know was probably a good move in retrospect, but doing it in the middle of this massive failure for them started to make people believe that Nintendo was a little scaredy cat. Of course, this probably wasn't the reason, but nonetheless, with all these companies dropping out of E3, it was beginning to lose its charm, and in 2020, when the Earth wasn't doing so hot, it was obviously cancelled. It was then held virtually in 2021. I can only imagine how that went. Katamari is coming to PlayStation 5. I don't care. Then, in 2022, it was cancelled again. And sadly, in 2023, E3 was officially discontinued. Kinda sad looking in retrospect, but really, all the companies were out. What was there to do at that point? But what Nintendo did is nothing to scoff at. I mean, they pretty much began the trend of big companies doing digital presentations now, all with their Nintendo Directs, with the first one airing in October 2011. Let's take a look.
We've got some important news if you're an owner of Nintendo 3DS, or just thinking of becoming one. And really, if you're neither one yet, what's wrong with you?
They began it alright. Yeah, these early Nintendo Directs weren't bad, more so, atrocious. At the time, I honestly don't know if dropping out of E3 was the right thing to do. These Directs are just so boring and slow-paced. Reggie talked about Hulu Plus for 10% of this video! And yeah, the Directs were super often, but every time they ended up just repeating themselves. Like, they talked about Game & Wario in so many Directs leading up to that game. Nintendo disguised these as important, but no. Of course, these things have severely improved over the years. However, there's something about that old Direct charm with people like Iwata and Reggie hosting them. The new guys aren't as fun, but they deliver so much info at such a fast rate. In turn, this creates a lesser amount of Directs every year, usually only 3 at this point, one early in the year around February, then June, and usually capping the year off in September. But man, this makes a Direct an event. Who knows what will be shown? Every year, in all 3 months that I just mentioned, there's always some kind of rumor going around about Directs coming soon and what they can show off. I always get so excited for them to always disappoint me. Soon after, Sony and Microsoft would start their own digital presentations as well, with Sony doing their State of Play since 2019, and Xbox just does their little thing, Crazy how Xbox still hasn't fully recovered from the Xbox One's launch. It makes me so giddy. Well, that's pretty much where we are today. Sure, some soul is lost in how we get our gaming info. I mean, we don't have any gaming magazines left, nor any big company physical events, or even just instruction manuals in our games. But overall, it is better this way. With the internet, more people can get more info than they ever have before, in an even faster, and frankly, improved format. I must say, we gamers have had it very good in the realm of getting our info across. So much so that we made video games the most popular form of media of all time. And like I said, it may not be as charming as it was in the past, but it's better this way. Things like magazines may be a little fun to look back on, but they're just novelties at this point. Well, what do we learn by talking about this? Get a generator.